at 10:30 p.m. on the Newshour Agenda. Viewers, today Beijing saw the convention of two influential world leaders. President Donald Trump is in China for a summit with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, marking the most significant face-to-face meeting between the leaders in years. Now, this meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping is particularly significant considering it is in the backdrop of the ongoing US-Israel war with Iran. Amidst what's appearing to be a global energy crisis, the two leaders have come together to discuss a plethora of issues. But the world will be watching this meeting very closely, as the outcomes from this meeting could have significant ramifications on the current geopolitical situation in the Middle East.
Thank you again, President Xi, for this beautiful welcome. And tonight it is my honor to extend an invitation to you and Madam Peng to visit us at the White House this September 24th. And we look forward to it. And I'd now like to raise a glass and propose a toast to the rich and enduring ties between the American and Chinese people. It's a very special relationship. And I want to thank you again. This has been an amazing period of time. Thank you, President Xi.
Welcome back to China after 9 years. The whole world is watching our meeting. Currently, transformation not seen in a century is accelerating across the globe, and the international situation is fluid and turbulent. The world has come to a new crossroads. Can China and the United States overcome the Thucydides trap and create a new paradigm of major country relations?
Now, while this meeting is happening in the backdrop of a very important global energy crisis, what are the key takeaways from the meeting that have actually happened? Let's tell you about some of these big takeaways of the Trump-Xi Jinping meeting. The first is that both agreed that the Strait of Hormuz must stay open. Second, Xi Jinping has opposed the militarization of Hormuz. Takeaway 3, they've also opposed any efforts to impose tolls. Takeaway 4, both have agreed that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Takeaway 5, China is willing to buy more US oil. Now remember that this comes at a time when the global energy supply chains have been hit hard due to tensions in the Middle East. Back home here in India, the prices of milk have already risen. The RBI governor has also warned that it is only a matter of time before the government passes on the burden of the rising cost of fuel imports onto the consumer. Viewers, fuel prices are on the rise across the world, and the war has had a major impact on the pockets of the common man, not just here in India, but across the world. Let's take a look at what the global precedent is as far as fuel hikes are concerned. In the United Kingdom, it's an increase of 22%. Hong Kong has seen an increase of 25%. In Germany, it's been 27% increase. In Netherlands at 28%. In Italy, 30%. Spain has seen a 34% hike, and in Japan from 30 to 35% of hike. Now, it's clear that the Middle East war has hit the global economy hard. The world is looking for a solution, and that solution could come from what was discussed behind closed doors between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. Well, could it? That's what we debate tonight.
You're watching the News Hour at 10.
Let me take this across to our guest. Joining us, Dr. Brahma Chalani is a strategic affairs expert. Joining us, Dr. Wael Awad is a Middle East expert with us. Ina Tangent is senior fellow at the Taipei Institute and chairman of Asia Narratives. We also have Aaron Eaton-Mayer, attorney and Middle East expert. But my first question is to John Rosomondo, geopolitical and national security strategist. John Rosomondo, is this all just about the optics? Is there more to it? And how much of this will actually impact on the West Asia crisis? Is it just wishful thinking?
Well, I think that President Trump has hope that he can lean on Xi Jinping to put some pressure on Iran to back down on its side. Just like, when Israel attacked Qatar, it was able to get Hamas to back down. However, I am not optimistic that Xi Jinping will heed anything that Trump says.
Okay, let me bring in fact, Ina Tangent on that. Ina Tangent, it may be easier said than done. While people may hope that, President Trump may request Xi Jinping to do something as far as the Middle East crisis is concerned, but just going by the kind of announcements, for instance, both agree that Iran shouldn't have nuclear weapons. Both agree that the Strait of Hormuz should be open. While there may be a convergence between US and China, does this necessarily translate into what Iran will want to do?
Well, let's be clear. This is a situation started by the United States, and inevitably, just like Ukraine, it falls on the lap of China. It's just the same story, different day, different country. And the fact is, many countries, including India, needs to step up and to say to all concerned, the U.S., Israel, and also Iran, that this has to stop. Iran has every reason to be angry. Leaders were killed, including its spiritual leader, but it does not mean that they have the right to punish the rest of the world. People in India, throughout Southeast Asia, Africa, South America are all going to suffer because of this. And these are countries that otherwise might have a lot of sympathy towards Iran. In terms of what China can do, it's overestimated. You have over 30 independent commanders who are staying out of touch with each other so that they're not discovered, who are waging war on their own terms. Just simply getting any kind of message through and making sure that anything could happen would be extremely difficult. Now, this is their home. What would China tell them to do? Give in to the maximalist demands of Donald Trump, e.g., you surrender, I take your oil, everything's fine? No, it's not going to happen. This is, once again, a pipe dream. It's going to take a lot of countries, BRICS, stands, ASEAN, the African League, South America, all to come together and say, look, you guys, it's time to knock it off. Hopefully the EU would also be in on that.
Well, I think we've lost that line there. But let me bring in Aaron Eaton-Mayer on that. Aaron Eaton-Mayer, somewhere, well, US have to, kind of go a little soft in terms of what its demands are if it really wants to achieve peace. Because, it may want a set of things to be falling in place, but time is, in a sense, running out because there is domestic pressure. There are elections in November, which is not too far away from where we are at the moment.
Yeah, the upcoming elections are certainly a factor, and that's something that both Iran and China are very, very aware of. But with that said, at this point, Iran has put its cards on the table, right? It has closed the Straits of Hormuz. They've shown that they can have an outsized impact on basically the world economy. Which is, as both President Trump and Premier Xi have admitted, is common ground for the United States. Neither the United States nor China can allow the Straits of Hormuz or really any other major trade route to be closed by a single country. The problem remains, what is the end goal? For China, let's not forget China has an enduring presence within the Iranian oil area. Right, there are some oil fields that remain controlled by China directly. Others export primarily to China, if not exclusively. So China does have the capacity to exert a significant amount of control, even with the fragmented nature of Iranian military as it stands right now. The question that really underlies this for me is when Premier Xi comes out and starts talking about Taiwan more than anything, that seems to indicate that there are attempts to make some, what they call it in political circles, log rolling, that there are deals that they're trying to reach that can then be imposed upon the region.
All right, but, actually, I thought today's statements were minus mentions of Taiwan. And let me bring in Ina Tangent back on that. The fact that Taiwan has been mentioned in the run-up to these meetings, how much of that actually is a factor? Because I think President Trump has been very consciously silent on that today.
Well, I think it's been silent perhaps in public, but in private, he's been trying to use this as a lever. And you'll recall that, or maybe not, but before Trump left Washington, the Chinese ambassador to the U.S. said that there are 4 red lines, Taiwan being the uppermost one. So I think it was quite clear that, if you look at Trump's background, he's always looking for some sort of leverage, something he can threaten with. This was Taiwan. He thought, well, I'll offer them Taiwan. They give me Iran. It's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be China and Iran versus the United States and Israel, nor is it going to be a trade-off between these two entities. Taiwan is a domestic affair for the Chinese. It's a settled affair. It's nothing that the U.S. can give them.
Okay.
They just don't want them trying to push a war.
All right. Let me bring in other panelists as well. While of course, Iran has its own concerns, it's lost a lot of lives, including that of its supreme leader, so on and so forth. The big question is how much of what China is saying today is something that Iran is going to pay heed to?
Well, China is not saying anything else except that they wanted to end the cessation of activities in that part of the world, and also they wanted to make sure the Strait of Hormuz is open. And that's not a new, because the United States and Israel led to this closure of the Strait of Hormuz because they started the war on Iran. And then the Americans, instead of opening the Strait of Hormuz, they countered the measure by start targeting the Iranian ships in the international water. And that's why Iranians have continued partially to close the Strait of Hormuz. So China definitely wanted this, to sustain the line of supply from the Strait of Hormuz. And we all know that at the end of the day, it's not the war on Iran, it's just a part of the major power struggle. And the United States wanted to bring the fight to the doorstep of Beijing. So therefore, I believe in the wider perspective of the strategy of the United States is to make sure that not they only control the passage of oil from all over the world, but also they wanted to control the countries which possess the major supply of oil. Name it Venezuela, where they had the largest reservoir of oil, then Iran, the second largest reservoir of gas, and the fourth reservoir of oil, and then talk of the Strait of Hormuz, 1/5 of the global trade. So I believe that is what benefit the United States. But however, the impact of the global impact has been felt even in the United States. That is because of the upsurge of the prices. And I don't think the European Union will be in a position even to sustain another 1 month of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So in everybody's interest, that Strait of Hormuz should be opened, and the United States should ease its position. They know the United States wanted only China to adhere or accept the American dictation of how they see their conflict. We all know that this is illegal, illegitimate war, and that's what the Chinese wanted to tell the American, that you started the war and you should finish it.
All right, before I go across to Brahmacharli, quick response from John Rosamondo, and then I'm coming to you, Brahmacharlani.
Well, I just have to say that China has been playing a double game, but when it comes to Iran, China has been providing arms throughout the conflict. China and Iran have taken to using rail to send oil to China. So I think that the Chinese have a role to play, but it's not going to be in favor of Donald Trump. I'm highly skeptical that Xi will come and say, "Hey, Donald, Iran's the problem."
Right. Let me bring in Dr. Brahmacharlani. Dr. Brahmacharlani, let's bring in a different perspective into this. Of course, the back and forth and the blame game will continue. But it's very interesting that in the midst of all of this talk of what's going to happen in China in the context of the US-Iran war, the fact is that there is also a BRICS summit happening right here in New Delhi. And it is the foreign ministers of all the BRICS countries, including, of course, of Iran, who are present here. The big question is, while there's also this BRICS meeting happening, how significant is it while the spotlight is also on Beijing?
It's quite interesting that this BRICS foreign ministers meeting is being held in New Delhi at about the same time as Trump's Beijing visit. But we should not overlook the fact that Iran is a member of BRICS, and Iran has been complaining that the BRICS has been a mere bystander to the war of aggression against it. So the question that Tehran keeps asking is, when will BRICS play a meaningful role? So having a foreign ministers meeting in New Delhi is fine, but how is BRICS relevant relevant to the current situation? Is BRICS playing a meaningful role in ending this conflict? What is BRICS' role in terms of the global energy crisis? The fact is that the BRICS, despite its potential, hasn't shown an ability to play a meaningful role in the current crisis. And this is an unfortunate reality that we should not obscure. But I think the larger issue is this, that just one leader, Donald Trump, is holding the global economy hostage through his actions. First, he launched this reckless war with no basis in international law. Then after 40 days of conflict, he agreed to a ceasefire, only to impose a naval blockade. Now, in international law, a naval blockade itself is an act of war. So you have a ceasefire, and then immediately after the ceasefire, there's a blockade. And in response, what does Iran do? It reopened the Strait of Hormuz after the ceasefire. And when Trump imposed the blockade, Iran reclosed the Strait of Hormuz. Now here, we should not take the statements that are coming out from Beijing by Trump and by Xi Jinping at face value. For example, today's Washington Post carries a story on a U.S. intelligence assessment, which underscores that China has endured the Hormuz-related energy shock relatively well. It has endured that energy shock relatively well thanks to three reasons. One, its large oil reserves. Two, its overland pipelines from Russia and Central Asia.
Right.
China can import more oil and gas from Russia and from Central Asia. Countries like India, Japan, South Korea don't have that option.
Absolutely.
And also China is a world leader in renewables.
No, I think the larger point that you're making is very significant, that, I want to bring in Aaron Eaton-Mayer into this. Aaron Eaton-Mayer, firstly, it's a war that US started unilaterally. The objectives were not clear. I think we've all discussed all that. It's all out there, whether it's the nuclear arms, so on and so forth. There are several other aspects, regime change. What was the objective was not clear. That kept changing. Now, after the attempts at arriving at a ceasefire, US is the big stumbling block, is the global perception. From the Middle East to all the big economies that are impacted, because oil is something that's going to impact everybody universally. We've seen global gas prices rising, and that's going to put all economies in peril if we don't act soon. That's the larger global sense that's coming in. What's taking the United States so long is a question that many of our panelists and many of the citizens of the countries that they represent are asking.
Well, I don't think there's any easy answer at this point either. Certainly the statements that are coming out of the administration have not yet been clear for whatever reasons. At this point, it would be a strategic error of unimaginable proportions for the United States to simply let things lie, especially with what's happened in Hormuz. So that cannot be allowed to happen, right? For United States interests going forward. Past that, everybody's talking about, when Premier Xi talked about the Thucydides trap. Is international trade going to be the means by which everything is avoided, leaving any specifically Iran-oriented effects relegated to obscurity? That it was all a feint. It's possible. I don't think so. I think there's another step that's going to be coming, irrespective of the crunch that we're all feeling right now. And make no mistake, we are. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but there's at least one more step coming, and it cannot be the United States simply walking away. There must be some further action of one form or another.
There's going to be some more action. Brahmachalani, how do you react to that? Because, already the state that the global economy, that, the entire energy supplies are in, it's going to take 6 months to a year by some estimates to reach where we were before the war. If there's another round of action, God knows how long that will take to fix the economies across the globe.
Well, since we're talking about the Trump-Xi Jinping summit, let's not overlook one fact. China is happy that the US has been bogged down by a much weaker power like Iran. the conflict for China provides an opening to contain America's influence in the Middle East. All the GCC countries, that is the 6 Gulf Arab countries, the so-called Gulf sheikdoms, are all in the US camp. All 6 of them host US military bases. And for China, Iran remains the most important strategic partner in the Middle East. It is also the instrument for China to erode America's influence and power in the Persian Gulf region. And one other thing which is also interesting is that, according to this US intelligence report, China is the second most insulated economy after the US. The US, as you know, is the world's largest exporter of oil and gas now. So it's ironical that China, which is energy dependent on energy imports, is the second most insulated economy after the US today. In other words, it's the other economies that are bearing the brunt of the global energy shock. And I think we have to really not expect this summit in Beijing to deliver outcomes that would help promote global interests.
All right. So, in fact, Ina Tangent, would you like to respond to that? This summit, because the two big global economies, whether it's China or US, are absolutely insulated from what's happening. It's all the other countries and, countries whose names I read out that are the ones who are majorly impacted by this. So one shouldn't really expect much out of this, says Brahmachalani.
Well, I think he's wrong. I was in American politics. I can tell you I used to run campaigns. This is not working out well for Donald Trump. The majority of Americans are extremely angry. 2 out of every 3 is against the war. About the same percentage are very angry about inflation. He promised to do something about that when he moved into office. It's gone the other way. And he said he wouldn't get involved in forever wars, things like that. The idea that China is happy to watch the world go down is nonsense. China depends very heavily on importing resources and then exporting value-added goods. It needs markets. It needs to have logistics. If you start looking at the and putting the dots together, what did the U.S. do in the last year? They attacked Nigeria. They took over Venezuela, or at least seized the president and his wife, and then they attacked Iran. What do they all have in common? Oil economies that were selling oil to China. If you go back to a book that was written in 2022 by the current undersecretary of the Department of War in terms of policy, he wrote that he said that the way to handle China was to take away its energy and to interfere with its logistics. And what do you mean by that? He meant putting pressure on Panama Canal, on the Straits of Hormuz, on anywhere where China was benefiting. And if this goes to the Straits of Malacca, we're all in trouble. So this idea that somehow this big power competition is insulating these two is, I believe, completely wrong.
Okay, John, would you like to respond to that? Because, at the end of the day, serious questions about what's happening domestically, number one. And number two, why US is delaying, getting an off-ramp. US was the one that wanted an off-ramp, but now it seems to be desperately searching for one, and in that search has reached Beijing.
Well, I think that, as Anar talked about with regard to Elbridge Colby's book, a lot of this is talked about in Washington as a way to get at China, and through Iran. So I think that, the president is in a very difficult situation. I don't think that, she's going to give in despite the pleasantries. You have Marco Rubio describing China as America's #1 adversary. So you have that, and I just don't see this summit having any outcome that will affect this war.
Let me also bring in fact, at the end of the day, Dr. Wael Awad, will Iran also accept that it also has a role in terms of ensuring that there is, lasting global peace? Because, it's not just the countries that may be purchasing oil from Iran. The point is that both sides will have to climb down a little bit to achieve that peace. But the question is Iran also prepared to do that? While you can raise questions of US and its own role, how much is Iran also willing to concede?
Iran, despite the fact that they have been attacked and they are the victim of this aggression, they have already made it very clear that they wanted a durable peace. They've been asking for international guarantee that the United States and Israel will not come back and attack Iran. And they wanted also guarantee that the United States will not also revoke any kind of agreement that, like the President Trump did in 2018 when he pulled out of the nuclear deal. So therefore, who wanted to trust the United States currently? Look at the country who trusted the United States, they paid the price. Iraq, Saddam Hussein paid the price. Muammar Gaddafi paid the price. Why Iran should fall in the same trap? So I believe the bottom line of this visit of the American president to China is to get the help from the Chinese to come out of this quagmire. And he wanted the Chinese to give him some kind of a deal, commercial deal, that he can go back and sell it to his own audience in the United States to gain back his popularity and say that he can be the leader of the world. I think the American is missing the point here by not treating the Chinese neck to neck together and in equal footing. And if they do so, Iran will fall definitely on the line of a global peace, where Iran have been stabilizing peace in the region. And I don't think, if I put a chart of the United States and the other side, the Iranian, for the last 200 years, I can tell you that there is not a single attack by Iran, but the rest of the board will be filled of American attack in every country on the name of regime change, or in the name of regime change by force, or even enjoying killing people, as the American president said, that we can continue to obliterate a civilization from this part of the world.
Aaron Eaton-May, would you like to respond to that? Not just the fact that many of the countries, or most of the countries that the United States has attacked in the recent past, happen to be countries that are oil producing. And number two, the fact that Iran just wants guarantees, international guarantees that the US is not in a position to give. And we even saw during the opening, the closing, as Brahmacharani mentioned earlier, the Strait of Hormuz, so many flip-flops coming in from President Trump. We've actually lost count of them.
Well, let's start with the second one. The Iranian regime is talking about guarantees. The Iranian regime has no credibility. Okay, if you want to talk about starting wars, right, the Iranian regime hasn't started external wars. They use their proxies for that. They direct their attentions internally. So if we do want to talk about attacks, talk to the Baloch, talk to the Ahwazi, the Kurds, the Lur, the Azeri, the Turkmen. They'll tell you exactly what happens when Iranian forces are deployed, because they do it internally under the cover of night. So let's not pretend about that.
So are we saying other countries don't engage in covert operations? The United States and others have absolutely no covert operations anywhere?
Remind him of
many countries do. The United States, however,
does that necessarily mean you can start a war?
I would not say that at all.
So what's the argument then here? But then it's very clear that it's US that's been the aggressor here in the case of Iran.
And I would say absolutely not. After 47 years of Iran using every means that it can against the United States, generally targeting civilians, it's not that kind of situation. There's no comparison. I know it's convenient for people to call it that, but there is no real comparison.
You want to respond to that,
the American president said that he was arming the Kurdish people, and he gave the arm to civilian to attack Iranian. It doesn't mean that the Americans are not involved directly in breaking down the government of Iran, which has been democratically elected. The similar fashion, they have done it during 1953 when they removed Mohammad Mossadegh from power with the help of the CIA and MI5. And even the Israeli Mossad played a major role in creating havoc and creating the Savak, the intelligence apparatus of Iran, which have been killing the Iranian people. And in fact, if we look at the Israelis and the American covert operation, we know that more than 20,000 Iranian civilian has been killed since Americans have imposed their sanction in Iran ever since the Republic of Islamic Republic has came in 1979. And that's why the sanction was not closely, not now. Even the American knows that even they froze the money of the Iranian and their asset. And look at what they have done to Iraq. They invaded Iraq, they occupied it, and now the whole of Iraq money goes in dollars to the American bank, and they cannot even take $100 out without the American accepting that or sanctioning it. And even they asked the American to pull their troops from Iraq. They said, we'll freeze the money. So what are you kind of a blackmail the United States is doing? Nothing but a cowboy diplomacy where they wanted to create only looting of the nations. And that's what they're trying for Iran.
John Rosamondo, respond to that, because this is what Trump said on Truth Social on the 3rd of April this year. He says, with a little more time, we can easily open the Hormuz Strait, take the oil and make a fortune. Is this the cowboy diplomacy that Wael Ahmed was referring to?
Well, let's just talk about the whataboutism here. I mean, the Islamic Republic of Iran seized America's embassy. It was killed over 1,000 Americans over the past 47 years. It has subverted every Arab country. Lebanon has become a colonial dependency of the Islamic Republic. I mean, it's the kind of thing that President Trump is doing something that should have been done over 40 years ago when Iran was attacking the oils and President Reagan, reflagged Kuwaiti tankers. So, I mean, this is something that Iran, I mean, the whole thing about Mossadegh, he was the appointed prime minister. The people of, he was not elected. And the Shah was justified in removing him.
Well, not the Shah, it was the Mossad and the CIA and the MI5, and it's written in your CIA blueprint. They have came out with it.
Let's put it this way. It's like you want to talk about stuff for the IRGC has killed far more people, according to human rights, for the past 47 years. And I guess that you think the IRGC and its murdering of Iranian civilians is something that should be praised. That is what you're saying. But what about
I respect your point of view, though I don't agree, but that doesn't justify the American attack in any country, by the way.
Okay, let's leave it there. Let's leave it there, gentlemen. Of course, differing points of view. We can all agree to disagree. Certainly different strategic interests. But at this point of time, the one thing that's in common is that all of us are going to be impacted if there is a global fuel crisis. Some a little more than the others, but certainly all eyes on how the two stakeholders, primarily US and Iran, can arrive at an early peace. And if they don't, then there will certainly be global repercussions diplomatically and otherwise. Let's leave it there for the moment. Dr. Brahma Chalani, Dr. Wael Ahmed, Ina Tangent, Aaron Eaton Mayer, and John Rosamando, thanks so much for joining us this evening.